The slap echoed through a deathly silent courtroom. Adrian Sterling, New York's wealthiest man, had just struck his wife in front of the cameras and the bailiff, arrogant enough to believe his money made him untouchable. He was there to strip her of her dignity and leave her with nothing. But the true terror arrived when the judge stood up. Instead of calling for order, she stared straight at the billionaire and declared, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Adrian didn't realize the woman on the bench wasn't just a judge. She was his wife's estranged mother. Justice is about to get very personal. The penthouse of the Sterling Tower looked less like a home and more like a mausoleum of glass and steel. It hovered above Manhattan, disconnected from the grit and noise of the streets below, much like its owner, Adrian Sterling. Adrian was the kind of man who didn't just walk into a room, he annexed it. At 34, he was the CEO of Sterling Global, a conglomerate that had its hands in everything from pharmaceuticals to defense contracting. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, ice blue eyes, a jawline that could cut glass, and a soul that had been sold for profit long ago. Across the sprawling living room, Isla Sterling sat on the edge of a beige Italian leather sofa, her hands trembling in her lap. She looked nothing like the vibrant art student Adrian had married 5 years ago. That girl had worn color. This woman wore neutrals, blending into the furniture as if she were just another expensive accessory Adrian had grown bored of. "Are you listening to me, Isla?" Adrian's voice was smooth, devoid of emotion, as he adjusted his diamond cufflinks. Isla looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "I heard you, Adrian. You want me out by tonight?" "By noon," he corrected, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "Tiffany is moving her things in this evening. I don't want her to see your clutter. It would upset the feng shui." Isla felt a familiar sharp pain in her chest. Tiffany, the model he hadn't even bothered to hide for the last 6 months. "We're not even divorced yet, Adrian. You can't just move your mistress into our marital home." Adrian laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. He walked over to the table where a stack of legal documents lay. He picked them up and tossed them into her lap. They slid off her silk skirt and scattered onto the floor. "Read the prenup again, darling. This isn't a marital home. It's my home. You were just a guest who overstayed her welcome." He leaned down, his face inches from hers. The smell of his expensive cologne, once intoxicating, now made her nauseous. "You were a nobody when I found you waiting tables to pay for your paints, a charity case. And now you're returning to being a nobody. I'm doing you a favor, really. You never belonged in this world." Isla bit her lips so hard she tasted iron. "I loved you, Adrian. I gave up everything for you. My friends, my career, my family. And that was your choice," he sneered, straightening up. "And frankly, it was a bad investment. Now pack your bags. If you take anything that I bought you, jewelry, clothes, even that ridiculous painting you're working on, I'll have you arrested for theft. You leave with what you came with." Which, if I recall, was a worn-out denim jacket and $50. Isla stood up. She was shaking, but a spark of anger, long dormant, flickered in her chest. "You think you're untouchable because of your money? But you're cruel, Adrian. Karma will find you." "Karma is a fairy tale poor people tell themselves to feel better about being failures," Adrian replied, walking toward the private elevator. "I'll see you in court on Friday. My lawyers tell me it will be a bloodbath. Try not to cry too much. It ruins the press photos." The elevator door slid shut, sealing him away. Isla stood alone in the silence. She looked down at the scattered papers. He was right about one thing. She had given up her family. She hadn't spoken to her mother in 5 years. Her mother, a woman of rigid principles and iron will, had forbidden her from marrying Adrian. "He has the eyes of a shark, Isla. He will eat you alive," her mother had warned. Isla had called her mother controlling, jealous, and bitter. She had packed her bags and run off with the billionaire prince, convinced love would conquer all. She walked to the window, looking out at the city that felt so cold. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a cheap burner phone she had bought secretly 2 days ago. Her hands shook as she dialed a number she hadn't called in half a decade. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "This is the office of Judge Beatrice Caldwell," a stern voice answered. "Mom," Isla whispered, her voice breaking. "It's me. You were right. You were right about everything." Friday morning arrived with the subtlety of a hurricane. The steps of the New York Supreme Court were swarming with paparazzi. Adrian Sterling's divorce was the tabloid event of the season. The narrative had already been spun by Adrian's PR team. Isla was the gold digger, the unstable artist who had leached off his fortune and cheated on him. A black Maybach pulled up to the curb. Adrian stepped out, looking like a god of commerce in a bespoke charcoal suit. He paused, flashing a charming, sorrowful smile for the cameras, the face of a heartbroken man doing his duty. Hanging on his arm, dressed in a white suit that looked inappropriate for the occasion, was Tiffany. She beamed, waving as if she were on a red carpet. "Adrian! Adrian! Is it true she stole $1 million in jewelry?" a reporter shouted. "No comment," Adrian said smoothly. "I just want this painful chapter closed so I can focus on the future." He squeezed Tiffany's waist. A few minutes later, a yellow taxi pulled up. Isla stepped out. She wore a simple navy dress, one of the few things she had bought with her own money years ago. She looked pale, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. The cameras flashed blindingly, and the questions were vicious. "Isla, did you cheat on him with the pool boy? How much alimony are you demanding? Is it true you were an escort before you met him?" She kept her head down, clutching her files to her chest, pushing through the crowd. She had no security. A cameraman shoved a lens into her face, and she stumbled, nearly falling up the stairs. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Adrian, watching from the top of the stairs, didn't move a muscle to help her. He just checked his watch. Inside courtroom 4B, the atmosphere was suffocating. The gallery was packed with journalists and curious onlookers. Adrian sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by 3 of the city's most expensive sharks, lawyers who cost more per hour than most people made in a month. Isla sat alone at the defendant's table. Her legal representation was a public defender named Mr. Henderson, a tired-looking man with coffee stains on his tie, who had met her only 10 minutes ago. "Look," Henderson whispered, rifling through messy papers. "Sterling's team is brutal. They're offering a settlement, $10,000, and you sign a non-disclosure agreement banning you from ever speaking his name. I suggest you take it. If we go to trial, they'll bury you." "I don't want his money," Isla said softly, her eyes fixed on the empty judge's bench. "I want my reputation. I want the truth." Henderson sighed. "The truth is expensive, Mrs. Sterling. We can't afford it." "All rise," the bailiff bellowed, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "The Honorable Judge Beatrice Caldwell presiding." A hush fell over the room. Adrian leaned back in his chair, smirking at Tiffany, who was sitting in the front row of the gallery. He didn't care who the judge was. Judges were just politicians in robes, and politicians could be bought. He had donated to enough campaigns to know how this worked. The door behind the bench opened. Judge Beatrice Caldwell walked in. She was a woman of 60, but she carried herself with the vitality of a warrior. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp bob, her face striking and severe. She didn't look at the gallery. She didn't look at the cameras. She walked up the steps, her black robes billowing, and took her seat. She adjusted her glasses and opened the file in front of her. Her eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the courtroom. They lingered for a fraction of a second on Isla, who was staring at her hands, tears threatening to spill. Then, the judge's gaze shifted to Adrian. Adrian felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. He didn't recognize her. He had never met Isla's mother. Isla had told him her family was dead to her and lived in some backwater town in Ohio. He had never bothered to ask for names or details. Why would he care about the lineage of a peasant? Civil Case 2049, Sterling versus Sterling, Judge Caldwell announced. Her voice was calm, resonant, and commanded absolute obedience. I have read the preliminary motions. Mr. Sterling, you are petitioning for a dissolution of marriage based on infidelity and fraud. Adrian's lead lawyer, a man named Marcus Thorne, let's call him Richard Graves, stood up. Yes, Your Honor. We have extensive proof that the defendant entered this marriage under false pretenses and has engaged in adulterous behavior. Is that so? Judge Caldwell asked. She didn't look at Graves. She was staring directly at Adrian. And you, Mr. Sterling, you are the injured party? Adrian stood up, buttoning his jacket. He flashed his trademark smile. I am, Your Honor. I gave this woman the world. I pulled her out of poverty. And in return, she betrayed me. I simply want justice. Justice. Caldwell repeated the word as if tasting it. An interesting concept, Mr. Sterling. Let us see if you can handle it. The trial began. For 2 hours, Richard Graves systematically dismantled Isla's life. He presented doctored photos, witnesses who had clearly been paid off, and bank statements showing transfers Isla had never made. It was a masterclass in character assassination. Isla sat silently, taking the blows. She looked small, defeated. Finally, it was time for the cross-examination. But instead of letting his lawyer speak, Adrian grew impatient. He wanted to deliver the final blow himself. He requested to take the stand to testify about the emotional distress Isla had caused him. Adrian sat in the witness box, looking every bit the tragic hero. She was abusive, Adrian lied, looking straight at the jury box, though there was no jury, only the judge. She would scream at me, throw things. I feared for my safety. Liar! The scream tore through the courtroom. Isla had stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She couldn't take it anymore. The lies about the money she could handle, but the accusation of abuse, when she was the one who flinched every time he raised his voice, broke her. Isla, sit down, Henderson hissed, tugging at her arm. No, Isla shouted, her voice shaking with 5 years of suppressed rage. Tell them about the bruises, Adrian. Tell them how you locked me on the balcony in December because I forgot to pick up your dry cleaning. Tell them how you made me beg for money to buy tampons. The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed wildly. Adrian's face turned a violent shade of red. His mask of cool indifference cracked. He despised being interrupted. He despised being contradicted. And most of all, he despised her voice. He stood up from the witness box, ignoring the bailiff. He marched toward the defendant's table. You shut your mouth, you ungrateful little gutter rat, Adrian roared, closing the distance between them. Mr. Sterling, sit down. Judge Caldwell's voice boomed, amplified by the microphone, but Adrian was too far gone. He reached Isla. She looked up at him, defiance in her eyes for the first time. I am not afraid of you anymore, she said. That was the trigger. In a blind fury, forgetting the cameras, forgetting the law, forgetting where he was, Adrian swung his right hand. Crack! The sound of the slap echoed off the high mahogany walls like a gunshot. Isla's head snapped to the side. She stumbled back, falling into her chair. The courtroom froze. Total, absolute silence. Even the paparazzi stopped clicking for a heartbeat, stunned by the audacity. Adrian stood there, breathing heavily, his hand still raised. Then he realized what he had done. He slowly lowered his hand, straightening his cuffs, attempting to regain his composure. She provoked me, Adrian stammered, looking around the silent room. You all saw it. She's hysterical. Mr. Sterling. The voice came from the bench. It was low, terrifyingly quiet. Adrian turned to look at the judge. Judge Beatrice Caldwell was standing up. She was no longer just a judge. Her face was pale with a rage that transcended the legal system. Her hands were gripping the gavel so hard her knuckles were white. She wasn't looking at him as a defendant. She was looking at him as prey. Did you just strike the defendant? Judge Caldwell asked, her voice trembling with restrained violence. Your Honor, it was a reflex, Adrian scoffed, trying to use his power to brush it off. She was screaming. I needed to calm her down. A man has a right to— Another word, Caldwell interrupted, and I will have you gagged. She slowly descended the steps from the high bench. Judges never came down, but she was coming down. The bailiff moved to stop her, but she held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. She walked across the courtroom floor, her robes swishing. She walked right past the stunned lawyers. She walked right past the bailiff. She stopped 2 feet away from Adrian Sterling. She was shorter than him, but in that moment, she looked 10 feet tall. You think this is your penthouse, don't you? She whispered, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. You think you can treat people like property? I don't know who you think you are talking to, Adrian sneered, his arrogance returning. I am Adrian Sterling. I can have your job by tomorrow morning. I suggest you get back in your chair and finish this trial in my favor. Beatrice smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Oh, I intend to finish this, Adrian. But not as a judge. She turned to Isla, who was holding her cheek, weeping silently. Beatrice's expression softened instantly. She reached out and gently touched Isla's shoulder. Are you okay, darling? Beatrice asked softly. Adrian frowned. Darling. Isla looked up, tears streaming down her face. Mum? The word hung in the air. Adrian froze. He looked from Isla to the judge. He looked at their eyes, the same shape. He looked at the defiant set of their jaws. Mum? Adrian repeated, his voice cracking. Beatrice turned back to Adrian. The warmth vanished from her eyes, replaced by a glacial winter. That's right, Mr. Sterling, Beatrice said, her voice projecting to the back of the room. I'm not just the presiding judge. I'm the mother of the woman you just assaulted. The courtroom exploded. The courtroom didn't just erupt, it dissolved into anarchy. The reporters in the back rows were shouting into their phones, desperate to be the first to break the story. Billionaire slaps wife, judge's mother-in-law, live from the Supreme Court. Flashbulbs went off like strobe lights in a nightclub, blinding everyone near the bench. Adrian Sterling stood frozen, his hand still tingling from the impact of the slap. For the first time in his life, his brain couldn't compute the data. Mother? This terrifying woman with the eyes of a hawk and the robes of the law was the useless, backwater mother Isla had mentioned years ago. Richard Graves, Adrian's $10,000 an hour lawyer, was the first to react. He practically vaulted over the table, his face pale. Your Honor, I object, Graves stammered, sweating profusely. This is a mistrial. You are related to the defendant. This is a gross conflict of interest. You must recuse yourself immediately. Judge Beatrice Caldwell turned her gaze from her weeping daughter to the frantic lawyer. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. She straightened her robes and ascended the stairs back to her high chair. She picked up her gavel. Bang! "Sit down, Mr. Graves," Beatrice said, her voice cutting through the noise like a razor wire. "You are absolutely right. I am recusing myself from the divorce proceedings effectively immediately. I cannot preside over a civil case involving my own daughter." Adrian let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He buttoned his jacket, regaining a sliver of his arrogance. "Good," he spat, glaring at Isla. "Then get a real judge in here. Someone who knows who I am." Beatrice looked down at him, a dark, terrifying amusement curling the corner of her lips. "However," she continued, her voice dropping an octave, "before I step down, there is the matter of the crime committed in my presence. In this courtroom, I am the supreme authority. And you, Mr. Sterling, just assaulted a woman in open court in full view of court officers, the press, and the bench." "It was a domestic dispute," Adrian argued, waving his hand dismissively. "I'll pay a fine. How much? 5,000. 10. Beatrice leaned forward. "Bailiff!" Officer O'Malley, a burly man who had watched the slap with wide eyes, stepped forward. "Yes, Your Honor." "Take Mr. Sterling into custody," Beatrice ordered. "I am holding him in direct criminal contempt of court. Furthermore, I am recommending immediate charges for battery. Lock him up." "You can't do that," Adrian screamed as O'Malley grabbed his arm. "Do you know who I am? I own this city. I play golf with the mayor. Graves, do something." Graves looked helpless. "Mr. Sterling, you hit her in front of a judge. There's nothing I can do right now. Don't resist." But Adrian, fueled by adrenaline and narcissism, tried to yank his arm away. "Get your hands off me, you peasant." That was a mistake. Officer O'Malley didn't appreciate being called a peasant. He spun Adrian around, kicked his legs apart, and slammed him chest-first onto the defense table. The sound of Adrian's cheek hitting the mahogany was satisfyingly loud. Click, click. The handcuffs were cold and tight. "You have the right to remain silent," O'Malley grunted, hauling the billionaire upright. The humiliation was absolute. Adrian Sterling, the man who graced the cover of Forbes, was being frog-marched out of the courtroom like a common criminal. As he was dragged past the gallery, he looked desperately for Tiffany. He needed support. He needed a witness. "Tiffany, call the PR team. Tiffany!" But the seat where Tiffany had been sitting was empty. At the first sign of handcuffs, the model had grabbed her Hermes bag and sprinted for the exit, covering her face to avoid being associated with the disaster. As the doors slammed shut behind Adrian, a heavy silence fell over the room. Isla was still sitting in the chair, her hand covering the red mark blooming on her cheek. She felt numb. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaking violently. Beatrice banged the gavel one last time. "Court is adjourned. Everyone out, now." The press hesitated, wanting more, but one look from the judge sent them scrambling for the doors. When the room was finally empty, save for the bailiff guarding the door, Beatrice set down the gavel. Her shoulders slumped slightly, the judicial mask slipping. She wasn't a judge anymore. She walked down the steps, bypassing the bench, and moved toward the woman, trembling at the defendant's table. "Isla," she whispered. Isla looked up. Her eyes were swollen. She looked like a broken doll. I didn't know you were the judge. I didn't know." Beatrice knelt on the hard floor, heedless of her expensive robes. She reached out, her hands hovering, afraid to touch her own child. She saw the bruise forming on Isla's cheek, a physical manifestation of the last 5 years of mistakes. "I know," Beatrice said, her voice thick with emotion. "I requested the case transfer this morning. I knew he would try to destroy you. I just didn't know. I didn't know it had gotten this bad." Isla finally broke. She launched herself into her mother's arms, burying her face in the black judicial robes. "I'm sorry, Mum. I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I ruined everything." Beatrice held her daughter tight, rocking her back and forth as she had when Isla was a child, terrified of thunder. But her eyes were dry. They were fixed on the door where Adrian had been dragged out. "Shh," Beatrice soothed, stroking Isla's hair. "You didn't ruin anything. You survived. And now we make him pay." An hour later, they were in the judge's private chambers. It was a room that smelled of old books and lemon polish, a stark contrast to the sterile, cold glass of Adrian's penthouse. Isla sat in a plush armchair, holding a cup of hot tea Beatrice had made her. An ice pack was pressed against her cheek. She looked small, wrapped in an oversized cardigan Beatrice kept in her office. Beatrice sat opposite her, having traded her robes for a sharp tweed blazer. She looked less like a figure of vengeance now, and more like the mother Isla remembered. Stern, composed, but safe. "Why didn't you call me?" Beatrice asked quietly. 5 years, Isla. Not a birthday card, not a Christmas call." Isla stared into her tea. "I was ashamed. You told me he was a shark. You told me he didn't love me, that he loved owning things. And I called you a bitter old woman." Isla looked up, fresh tears welling. "How could I come back and admit you were right?" And then, after the first year, he started controlling everything. He monitored my phone. He checked the mileage on the car. He said my family was toxic and he was protecting me. Beatrice's jaw tightened. Isolation. The classic weapon of a narcissist. I thought if I just loved him enough, he would soften, Isla confessed. But he just got harder. And then Tiffany came along, and suddenly I wasn't just a prisoner. I was an inconvenience. Beatrice sighed, taking off her glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose. I knew about Tiffany. I've had a private investigator tracking Sterling for 2 years. Isla's eyes widened. What? You were spying on me. I was watching over you, Beatrice corrected firmly. I am a judge, Isla. I see the worst of humanity every day. I knew men like Adrian Sterling don't change. I knew eventually he would discard you. I just needed to be ready when he did. Beatrice stood up and walked to a locked filing cabinet. She keyed in a code and pulled out a thick manila folder. She tossed it onto the coffee table in front of Isla. Isla opened it. It was full of photographs. Adrian with Tiffany. Adrian with other women. Adrian meeting with shady business partners. But more importantly, there were financial documents. What is this? Isla asked. Adrian thinks he's clever, Beatrice said, pouring herself a glass of water. He hides his assets in offshore accounts, Cayman Islands, Switzerland. He claims his net worth has dropped to avoid paying you a fair settlement. He's pleading poverty to the court while buying yachts through shell companies. Isla flipped through the pages. I didn't know any of this. Of course you didn't. He made sure you were busy trying to be the perfect wife while he robbed you blind. Beatrice sat back down. When I saw his name on the docket for my court, I pulled every string I had to get assigned the case. I intended to let the trial run its course, expose his fraud legally, and grant you half his empire. Beatrice's voice hardened. But then he hit you. Isla touched her cheek. He's never hit me before. He's thrown things near me, screamed at me, but never hit me. Because he's losing control, Beatrice explained. In that courtroom for the first time, you stood up to him. You embarrassed him. And a man like Adrian cannot handle humiliation. So, What happens now? Isla asked, fear creeping back into her voice. He has the best lawyers in the country. He'll be out on bail by dinner. He'll come for me. Let him come, Beatrice said, her eyes flashing with a dangerous light. He made a fatal error today. By assaulting you in my presence, he turned a civil divorce case into a criminal matter. He can't buy his way out of a witness list that includes a Supreme Court judge and 3 bailiffs. Beatrice leaned forward, taking Isla's hands. But this is going to be ugly, Isla. He will try to destroy your reputation. He will say you provoked him. He will dig up every mistake you've ever made. He will try to paint you as crazy. Are you ready for that? Isla thought about the last 5 years. The silence. The fear. The feeling of being slowly erased until she was just a ghost in a designer dress. She thought about the slap, the stinging proof that she meant nothing to him. She looked at her mother. She saw the strength she had run away from, the strength she desperately needed now. I don't have anything left to lose, Mom, Isla said, her voice steadying. He took my youth. He took my confidence. I'm not letting him take my dignity. Beatrice nodded, a fierce pride swelling in her chest. Good. Because I made a call while you were getting checked by the medic. A call to who? To an old friend of mine. Beatrice smiled. His name is Sebastian Thorne. He's not a polite lawyer like Mr. Henderson. He's a pit bull in a suit. He hates Adrian Sterling almost as much as I do. At that moment, the door to the chambers opened. A man stepped in. He was tall, with messy dark hair and a tie that was slightly askew. He looked less like a corporate attorney and more like a detective who hadn't slept in 3 days. But his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and currently scanning the room with intense energy. Beatrice, the man said, his voice raspy. I saw the news. Tell me it's true. Tell me the bastard actually slapped her in front of you. Hello, Sebastian, Beatrice said calmly. Isla, meet your new legal counsel. We're not just going for a divorce anymore. Sebastian looked at Isla, his expression softening instantly when he saw the bruise. He didn't offer a handshake. He offered a nod of respect. Ma'am, Sebastian said, I've been waiting 10 years to take a bite out of Sterling Global. If you give me the green light, I won't just get you a settlement. I'll take his company, his reputation, and his freedom. Isla stood up. She wiped the last tear from her face. When do we start? She asked. Sebastian grinned. It was a wolfish grin. Right now. I've already got the press release drafted. We're going to control the narrative before he even posts bail. Beatrice stood beside her daughter and her old friend. The trinity of retribution was assembled. But first, Beatrice said, checking her watch, we need to deal with the immediate threat. Adrian is currently in a holding cell downstairs. His lawyer, Graves, is filing an emergency motion for bail. They're going to argue that Adrian is a pillar of the community, and that the slap was a momentary lapse of judgment caused by emotional distress. Let them argue, Sebastian said, because while they're doing that, I'm going to be filing a restraining order that bans him from coming within 500 feet of Isla or any of her known associates. Associates? Isla asked. Me, Beatrice said simply. I'm the witness. If he comes near me, he goes back to jail. If he tries to intimidate me, he goes back to jail. We are going to squeeze him, Cla. We are going to make his life a living hell until he begs to sign those divorce papers. Just then, Beatrice's phone buzzed on the desk. She picked it up and read the text message. Her face went pale. What is it? Isla asked, sensing the shift in the room. Beatrice looked up, her eyes dark. It's the holding cell, she said. Adrian isn't there." "What?" Sebastian snapped. "How?" "He complained of chest pains," Beatrice read, her voice tight. "They took him to St. Jude's Hospital 10 minutes ago, and apparently the ambulance got lost on the way." Isla gasped. "He escaped?" "No," Beatrice said, crushing the phone in her hand. "He didn't escape. He was extracted. He has powerful friends, Isla. This fight just got a lot more dangerous." The city of New York never sleeps, but for Isla Sterling, the nightmare was just beginning. While the media was in a frenzy outside the courthouse, debating the legality of a billionaire vanishing from police custody, Adrian Sterling was sitting comfortably in a leather armchair at the Obsidian, an invite-only members club in Tribeca that didn't appear on any maps. He wasn't wearing handcuffs. He was wearing a fresh suit, sipping a scotch that cost more than a Honda Civic. "The optics are bad, Adrian," Richard Graves said, pacing the room. "You slapped her, on camera. Then you faked a heart attack and bribed an EMS crew. The district attorney is furious." Adrian swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "The DA is up for re-election in November. I'll make a donation to his opponent's super PAC if he doesn't calm down. As for the slap, spin it. Say I was under medication. Say she threatened to kill herself, and I was trying to snap her out of it." "And the judge?" Graves asked nervously. "Beatrice Caldwell isn't someone you can buy. She's the Iron Lady of the circuit. She's coming for blood." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Then we break her. Find dirt on her. Every judge has a skeleton. Maybe she took a bribe 10 years ago. Maybe she has a secret addiction. Dig it up. If we discredit the mother, we discredit the daughter." He pulled out his phone. "And send the cleanup crew to the penthouse. I want every hard drive, every document, and every scrap of paper shredded and incinerated. Isla knows where I keep the insurance files. If she gets her hands on the black ledger, a divorce settlement will be the least of my problems. I'll be going to federal prison." Meanwhile, in a brownstone in Brooklyn that served as Beatrice's fortress, the mood was tense. The windows were covered, and private security guards, hired by Sebastian, stood at the front and back doors. "He's not at the hospital," Sebastian said, slamming his laptop shut. "I just hacked the admission records. He was checked in and checked out in 3 minutes. He's gone to ground." Isla sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She looked stronger now, the shock of the morning replaced by a cold resolve. "He's going to destroy the evidence," she said. "The penthouse. In his study, behind the painting of the stormy sea, there's a wall safe. He keeps a black notebook and a hard drive there. He calls it his doomsday prepping." Sebastian looked at her sharply. "Do you know the combination?" "He changes it every month," Isla said. "But he's a narcissist. It's always a date related to his success. The date he made his first million. The date he bought the tower. The date he fired his father." "We need that drive," Sebastian said, checking his watch. "If his team gets there first, it's gone, and without it, it's just your word against his regarding the offshore accounts." "I can get in," Isla said. "My biometrics are still in the system. He hasn't had time to wipe the retinal scanner at the service entrance." "It's too dangerous," Beatrice argued, standing near the sink. "He might have guards there." "I have to do this, Mum," Isla said, standing up. "You fought for me today. Now I have to fight for myself. If we don't get that drive, he wins. He'll bury us in legal delays until we're bankrupt." Sebastian grabbed his jacket. "She's right, Beatrice. But she's not going alone." He pulled a Glock from a holster at his waist and checked the chamber. "I'm driving." The drive to the Sterling Tower was a blur of rain and neon lights. They parked 2 blocks away. Sebastian moved with the stealth of a man who had done this before. Isla later learned he used to be a prosecutor who worked with the mob unit before going private. They slipped into the service elevator. Isla's heart hammered against her ribs as she leaned toward the scanner. "Please verify identity," the robotic voice said. A beam of red light scanned her eye. "Welcome home, Mrs. Sterling." The doors opened. The penthouse was dark. The panoramic view of the city was breathtaking, but tonight it looked ominous. They moved quickly to the study. "Hurry," Sebastian whispered, standing guard by the door. Isla ran to the painting. She gripped the heavy frame and swung it open. The steel safe gleamed in the moonlight. Enter code. She tried the date of their wedding. Error. She tried the date he became CEO. Error. "Isla, we have company!" Sebastian hissed. He pointed to the security monitors on the wall. The main elevator was moving up. "We have 60 seconds. Isla closed her eyes. Think. What does he love most? Not her, not Tiffany. He loved winning. The date he acquired the rival firm, Omnicorp, she whispered. It was the day he said he became a god. She typed in 51221. Click. The safe swung open. Inside lay a thick black ledger and a silver external hard drive. Isla grabbed them, stuffing them into her bag. "Got it! Go!" Sebastian shouted. They sprinted toward the kitchen service exit, just as the front doors of the penthouse blasted open. 3 men in tactical gear stormed in. "Clear the room!" one shouted. Isla and Sebastian scrambled into the service elevator. Sebastian hit the garage button and jammed the close door button repeatedly. Through the narrowing gap, Isla saw one of the men enter the hallway. He looked right at the elevator. The doors shut. That was close, Sebastian exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. Too close. Isla clutched her bag to her chest. She could feel the hard drive pressing against her ribs. "We have the gun," she whispered. "Now let's pull the trigger." The next morning, the war went nuclear. Isla woke up at her mother's house to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly. It wasn't calls, it was notifications. She opened Twitter, X. The #1 trending topic was "Do Artenstock or Crazy Isla." Adrian's PR machine had been busy. A video had been leaked. It was grainy footage from inside their penthouse, taken months ago. It showed Isla screaming, throwing a vase at the wall, and crying hysterically. The caption read, "The truth about the abused wife. Isla Sterling has a history of mental instability and violent outbursts. Poor Adrian has been living in fear for years." Isla watched the video, her hand over her mouth. "That was the night I found out about Tiffany," she whispered to Beatrice, who was standing over her shoulder. "I wasn't attacking him. I was heartbroken. He cut the audio so you can't hear him laughing at me." "It's a deep fake narrative," Sebastian said, walking into the room with a tablet. "He's contextualizing the slap. He wants the public to think he slapped you because you were having a psychotic break and he needed to subdue you." "People are believing it," Isla said, scrolling through the comments. "She looks nuts. Gold digger got caught. Team Adrian." "Stop looking at it," Beatrice commanded, taking the phone away. "This is noise. The only thing that matters is what we have in that ledger." Sebastian placed the black ledger on the table. "I've been up all night going through it. It's worse than we thought, Beatrice. It's not just tax evasion. Adrian is laundering money for the Voros cartel." Beatrice froze. "The drug cartel?" "He's using his pharmaceutical shipping lines to move product," Sebastian explained. "And he's washing the money through shell real estate companies. This hard drive, it contains the shipping manifests. If we give this to the FBI, Adrian doesn't just lose his money. He goes away for life. And the Voros cartel, they don't leave witnesses." Isla felt a chill run down her spine. "So we're in danger. Real danger." "Yes," Sebastian said grimly. "Which is why we need to move fast. We need to authenticate this data and get it to a federal prosecutor I trust before Adrian knows we have it." Suddenly, Isla's burner phone rang. It was an unknown number. Sebastian signaled for her to answer, but put it on speaker. "Hello?" Isla said. "Isla." The voice was whispering, trembling with terror. "Isla, you have to help me." It was Tiffany. "Tiffany?" Isla asked, confused. "Why are you calling me?" "He's crazy, Isla. He's actually crazy." Tiffany was sobbing. "I'm at the penthouse. I heard him on the phone. He knows you have the ledger. He told the cleaners to find you. He said, no loose ends." And then he looked at me. Tiffany's voice dropped to a terrified whimper. "He told me to pack a bag because we're going on a trip, on his private jet tonight." But he didn't pack anything for himself. "Isla, I don't think I'm coming back from this trip." Isla looked at Beatrice and Sebastian. "He's going to kill her," Sebastian mouthed. "She knows too much, and now she's a liability." "Please," Tiffany begged. "I know I was awful to you. I know I stole your husband. But I don't want to die. The jet leaves Teterboro at 6 p.m. Please send the police." The line went dead. Isla stared at the phone. "We have to help her." "She's the enemy," Beatrice said coldly. "She helped him humiliate you." "She's a human being, Mum," Isla said firmly. "And if Adrian kills her, he disappears. He'll flee the country. We need to stop that jet. And if we save Tiffany, she becomes our star witness. She can testify to his state of mind, his plans, everything." Sebastian nodded slowly. Isla is right. Tiffany is the final nail in the coffin. If we get her to flip, Adrian is done. "But we can't call the police," Beatrice noted. "Adrian owns half the precinct. If we call 911, he'll get tipped off, and Tiffany will disappear before the cops even arrive." Sebastian stood up, checking his weapon again. "Then we don't call the police. We go ourselves. I have contacts at Teterboro. We intercept them on the tarmac." "That's suicide," Beatrice said. "No," Isla said, grabbing her coat. She looked different now. The fear was gone, burned away by the fire of survival. "Suicide is doing nothing. We're ending this. Today." Beatrice looked at her daughter. She saw the transformation. The victim was gone. The warrior had arrived. "Okay," Beatrice said, grabbing her car keys. "I'll drive. But if we're doing this, we're doing it my way." "What's your way?" Sebastian asked. Beatrice smiled, a cold, ruthless smile that terrified criminals in her courtroom for 30 years. "We bring the court to him." The rain at Teterboro Airport was torrential, turning the tarmac into a slick, black mirror reflecting the strobe lights of the private jet waiting on the runway. The engines of the Gulfstream G650 were already whining, a high-pitched scream that cut through the storm. Adrian Sterling dragged Tiffany across the wet asphalt. The model was stumbling in her heels, her mascara running down her face in dark streaks. She was screaming, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of the jet engines. "Get on the plane!" Adrian shouted, shoving her toward the stairs. He carried a single briefcase, the one containing the emergency cash and fake passports he had stashed years ago for a moment just like this. "Please, Adrian, I don't want to go," Tiffany wailed, gripping the handrail. "You don't have a choice," Adrian snarled. "You're my wife now. You go where I go." Suddenly, high beams cut through the darkness. A black SUV tore through the security gate, shattering the wooden arm, and screeched onto the runway. It drifted sideways, tires smoking despite the rain, and blocked the path of the jet. Adrian froze, his hand reaching inside his jacket. The doors of the SUV flew open. Sebastian Thorne stepped out first, his gun drawn and leveled at Adrian's chest. Beatrice Caldwell stepped out of the driver's side, looking like the angel of death in a trench coat. And finally, Isla. She stepped out into the rain. She wore no coat. The water soaked her dress instantly, but she didn't shiver. She walked forward until she was 10 feet away from the man who had owned her life for 5 years. "Going somewhere, Adrian?" Isla asked, her voice surprisingly steady against the wind. Adrian laughed. It was a manic, broken sound. "You!" he spat. "You just don't know when to quit, do you? You think you can stop me? I'm Adrian Sterling. I can fly over you. I can fly over the law." He tightened his grip on Tiffany's arm. "Take another step, and I break her neck." Tiffany sobbed, her eyes pleading with Isla. "Let her go, Adrian," Beatrice commanded, her voice projecting with the authority of the bench. "It's over. We have the ledger. We have the hard drive. We know about the Voros cartel." Adrian's face went pale. The arrogance flickered, replaced by genuine fear. You're lying." "I read the files myself," Sebastian shouted over the engines. "Money laundering, RICO statutes, conspiracy to commit murder. You're not looking at a divorce settlement anymore, Sterling. You're looking at 3 consecutive life sentences in a federal supermax." Adrian looked around wildly. He looked at the plane, his only escape. He looked at Tiffany, his hostage. He looked at Isla. "I made you!" Adrian screamed at Isla, saliva flying from his mouth. "You were nothing. I gave you a life. I gave you purpose." "No," Isla said, taking a step forward, ignoring Sebastian's warning gesture. "You gave me a cage. You made me small so you could feel big. But you're not big, Adrian. You're just a bully with a checkbook. And you're broke." "Broke?" Adrian sneered. "I have millions in this bag." "It doesn't matter," Isla said calmly, "because you have no one. No friends, no family, no legacy, just money. And where you're going, money can't buy you a view." Adrian's eyes darted. He pulled a small silver pistol from his jacket and pointed it at Isla. "I'll kill you! I swear to God, I'll kill you all!" Beatrice didn't flinch. She just smiled. "You could try, Mr. Sterling," Beatrice said. "But as I told you, I brought the court to you." Beatrice raised her hand. Suddenly, the hangar doors behind the jet rolled open. Floodlights blinded them. Dozens of them. "FBI, drop the weapon!" Teams of agents in tactical gear swarmed the tarmac from every direction. Armored vehicles boxed in the jet. Snipers appeared on the hangar roof, their laser sights painting red dots on Adrian's chest. Adrian stumbled back, stunned. He looked at Beatrice. "I called in a favor," Beatrice said simply. "The Department of Justice has been watching the Voros cartel for months. They just needed the evidence to link you to them. I gave it to them 10 minutes ago." Adrian looked at the laser dots on his chest. He looked at the gun in his hand. For a second, he considered ending it. He considered fighting. But Adrian Sterling was a coward. He dropped the gun. It clattered on the wet pavement. He dropped the briefcase. "Don't shoot!" he screamed, raising his hands, his face crumbling into a mask of pathetic fear. "I surrender. I have rights. Call my lawyer." Agents tackled him to the ground, slamming his face into a puddle of oil and rain. As they cuffed him, Tiffany scrambled away, running straight toward Isla. She collapsed at Isla's feet, sobbing. "Thank you. Oh my God, thank you." Isla looked down at the woman who had helped destroy her marriage. She didn't feel anger. She just felt pity. "Get up, Tiffany," Isla said gently, offering a hand. "You're free." Sebastian walked over to Adrian, who was being hauled up by 2 agents. Sebastian leaned in close. "By the way," Sebastian whispered, "I'm representing your wife in the civil suit. We're taking everything. The tower, the cars, the accounts, even that ugly watch." Adrian screamed obscenities as he was shoved into the back of an armored van. The doors slammed shut, sealing his fate. Isla stood in the rain, watching the taillights fade. She felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Beatrice. "It's done," her mother said softly. Isla turned and hugged her mother. For the first time in 5 years, the weight on her chest was gone. She could breathe. 6 months later. The courtroom was quiet, but this time it was a peaceful silence. Isla stood before the bench. She looked radiant. She wore a vibrant emerald green dress, a color she hadn't worn in years. Her hair was loose. She looked like herself again. Judge Beatrice Caldwell sat on the bench. She had come out of retirement for one final administrative hearing. Case 2049, Beatrice announced, a small smile playing on her lips. The assets of the Sterling estate have been liquidated. Proceeds have been distributed to the victims of the Voros cartel, with the remainder awarded to the plaintiff, Isla Caldwell. Isla smiled. She had dropped the name Sterling. She was Isla Caldwell again. "Thank you, Your Honor," Isla said. "And regarding the defendant?" Beatrice asked, looking at Sebastian. "Adrian Sterling entered a guilty plea to avoid the death penalty," Sebastian reported, looking sharp in a new suit. "He is currently serving his time at ADX Florence. He spends 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. He has requested visitation rights." "Denied," Beatrice said, banging the gavel with satisfying finality. They walked out of the courthouse together, Isla, Beatrice, and Sebastian. The paparazzi were gone. The scandal had faded, replaced by the next big story. "So," Sebastian asked, shielding his eyes from the bright autumn sun. "What now, Isla? You're a very wealthy woman. You could go to Paris. You could buy an island." Isla laughed. "I'm done with islands, and I'm done with hiding." She reached into her bag and pulled out a flyer. It was an invitation to an art gallery opening in Chelsea. The exhibition was titled The Golden Cage, a study in survival. "I'm painting again," Isla said, "and I'm starting a foundation for women who need to escape, for women who need to find their voice." Beatrice put her arm around her daughter. "I'm proud of you, Isla." "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom," Isla said, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. "You saved my life." "No," Beatrice said, looking at the city skyline, which no longer looked like a prison. "We saved each other." As they walked down the steps, Isla looked back one last time at the courthouse. Justice wasn't blind. Sometimes it just needed a mother's touch. She turned around and walked into her future, her head held high. Wow, what a roller coaster. From the billionaire's penthouse to a rainy tarmac showdown, Adrian Sterling finally got exactly what he deserved. It just goes to show, money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy you out of the consequences of hurting good people, especially when their mother is a savage judge. I hope you enjoyed this story of justice, redemption, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter. If you felt that slap in the courtroom as much as I did, please hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories like this, where the underdog takes down the giant, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. What would you have done if you were the judge? Would you have slapped him back? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.